sort of intellectual and social and political pondering of these weighty issues. And so this panel is on universities and historical injustices. Now, this panel builds on ongoing and emergent actions, events, sort of thought-provoking accounting of the role of universities in the United States in not only enslavement, right, but also settler colonialism and the ways in which the land-grant university, as Professor David Cheng talked about, was made possible through native dispossession. So this panel builds off of those kinds of movements in many ways that has been happening over the past few years. We have folks here who have participated, for example, in the reckoning of Harvard University and enslavement. We had invited, and this person couldn't come, but Georgetown University actually sold enslaved peoples as one of the ways in which it continued its profitability. And George Benson actually is somebody who's in charge or working with descendant communities to actually think through ways of repair and atonement in terms of descendant communities, in terms of people who were not only enslaved but also sold to profit Georgetown University. So this panel also seeks to engage with a place-based reckoning of the communities in which universities are embedded in as well. So not just the university itself as a bounded undertaking, right, but the ways in which it's sort of mutually constituted in these sort of various larger processes. So with that, I'm going to introduce the panelists. This panel is going to be really sort of capacious and broad-ranging in that we have the sort of four keynote speakers here. In addition, I'm going to introduce three or four folks who have been involved in and active in their universities in having them account for the historical injustices there. So I'll introduce them really briefly as well. But first, I want to introduce Professor Patty Lowe. Patty Lowe is director of, raise your hand, Patty, is director of Native American and Indigenous Research at Northwestern University and a professor in the Meadle School of Journalism. A member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe, Dr. Lowe is a former broadcast journalist in public and commercial television. She's the author of Indian Nations of Wisconsin, Histories of Endurance and Renewal, now in its second edition, which won the Wisconsin Library Association's 2002 Outstanding Book Award, Native People of Wisconsin. Native People of Wisconsin, also newly revised and expanded, which is used by 21,000 Wisconsin school children as a social studies text, and a teacher's guide to Native People of Wisconsin. Her latest book, Seventh Generation Earth Ethics, won the 2014 Midwest Book Award for Culture. Professor Lowe has produced many documentaries for public and commercial television, including the award-winning Way of the Warrior, which aired nationally on PBS in 2007 and 2011. She works extensively with Native youth, teaching digital storytelling skills as a way to grow the next generation of Native storytellers and land stewards. Professor Rhonda Robinson Thomas is Calhoun Lemon Professor of Literature at Clemson University, where she teaches early African American literature and American literature. Dr. Thomas has published Claiming Exodus, A Cultural History of Afro-Atlantic Identity, 1770 to 1903, and co-edited the South Carolina Roots of African American Thought. She contributed the Locating Slave Narratives chapter to the recently published Oxford Handbook of the African American Slave Narrative, and is the Acquisitions co-editor for the African American Literature series at the Clemson University Press. Dr. Thomas is also the director of the Call My Name, African Americans in Clemson University History Project, for which she has been awarded a Whitting Foundation Public Engagement Fellowship, a gift from the Clemson University Foundation, and grants from the NEH Creating Humanities Communities, SC Humanities, and the Clemson Office of the Provost Foundation, and grants from the NEH Creating Humanities Communities. So, wow, a really distinguished set of accomplishments from all of our panelists. I now want to introduce Dr. Rose Myron. joined the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition in May 2018 as its program manager. Dr. Myron holds a bachelor's degree with a minor in Spanish and a PhD in American Studies from the University of Minnesota. In her dissertation research, Rose examined how indigenous nations use tribal archives to resist historical trauma that includes forced removal, boarding schools, and other settler colonial policies. She showed how tribal archives are foundational for creating new narratives of indigenous history that center indigenous voices, speak truth about historical violence, and emphasize indigenous nationalism. Dr. Myron's dissertation was based in 7 years of community engagement and collaboration with the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican Nation, and she focused on the formation of their tribal archive to tell a story of memory, labor, and indigenous activism. Dr. Myron has also worked on several public history projects that sought to raise awareness about past and present historical violence, including a digital project that called attention to similar histories of detention at Fort Snelling and St. Paul, Minnesota, and Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. She also co-curated 2 collaborative exhibits with the Red Lake Ojibwe Nation that were led by Dr. Brenda Child, Red Lake Ojibwe, and has published numerous pieces that interrogate how we think about trauma and comfort in public history. Her work has been featured in the North Dakota Quarterly and the National Council on Public History, and she has an article about repatriation and public memory coming out next year in the journal Native American and Indigenous Studies. Christine Dindisi McCleave is an enrolled member of Turtle Mountain Ojibwe and executive director for the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. McCleave is a 3rd and 4th generation descendant of boarding school survivors. McCleave's grandfather attended Marty Indian School and Haskell Indian School, and her great-grandfather went to Carlisle Industrial Indian School. However, no one in her family spoke of these boarding school experiences. She was in her 30s before she learned of her family's boarding school history and started the exploration of her connection to her own intergenerational trauma and healing. McCleave's professional and educational experience has prepared her for her current work running a nonprofit. She has a Master's of Arts in Leadership from Augsburg College, and her thesis is on the spectrum of spiritual practices regarding traditional Native American spirituality and Christianity, which included examining the impact of the boarding schools on spiritual activities today. Conducting her research has been a profound and personal experience that led her to greater inner healing and a desire to work with others through the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Communication Studies from Northwestern College and previously worked in HR management at an HR consulting firm and in communications and marketing in Indian Land Tenure Foundation. She lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota with her family. So those are our 4 distinguished panelists for today, or for this session. I also want to introduce just this, and these 4 faculty members and speakers are also going to be featured in other panels. But I want to sort of include them because they're going to make brief remarks regarding their universities and historical injustices. So we have Professor Christopher Lehman, who's chair of the Ethnic, Gender, and Women's Studies Department at St. Cloud State University in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and has been working in terms of accounting for historical injustices at St. Cloud State. We have Balraj Gill, who's a doctoral candidate in American Studies at Harvard University, and she was involved and also in writing a key document on slavery, Harvard, and enslavement. We have Professor Kevin Whalen, who's an assistant professor of Native American Indigenous Studies at the University of Minnesota Morris, which was historically an Indian boarding school. And we have Guy Emerson Mount, who was featured in the last panel, who's an assistant professor of African American history at Auburn University, and has also worked on historical injustices at the University of Chicago. So we're going to hear from their remarks after the 4 panelists. I should also want to say that the working group on universities and historical injustices that has been funded by the Institute for Advanced Studies, so Yuichi Onishi, has been really crucial in helping us to organize this set of panels. So thank you so much, Yuichi. And also that the Institute for Advanced Study, the Thursday at 3:30, that time coincides with this panel, so I want to welcome you all who are here for the Thursday IAS at 3:30. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all. And our first up is Professor Patty Lowe.